answered.
Thanks, Todd.
Thanks,
All right,
Todd.
Claire, thank you so much for the time. It's great to see you.
Thank you all.
Best of luck with it. We look forward to it.
Thanks.
All right, moving right along. The fourth agenda item for the Parks and Public Spaces Committee before we go into joint session is a little bit of an unusual one. We have Todd Fine here, and as well as, I believe, Jacob Morris from the Harlem Historical Society to discuss the issue of a potential siting of an Elizabeth Jennings Graham monument in our district. But before I turn it over to you guys for your brief presentation, I just want to set the framework and expectations for the committee and members of the public about what's happening here and why we're hearing this item. And I'm sure we'll hear about this in a little more detail from them, but basically in the past, there was discussion in some circles within city agencies around the siting of this proposed monument in Vanderbilt Plaza in front of One Vanderbilt. And these gentlemen are here to discuss why, if I understand correctly, why they believe that that is not a good idea. And so what's a little bit funky about us hearing this is it's not an application, and we're actually going to be hearing why something wouldn't be cited in our district. The reason why we've kind of allowed this topic to be aired publicly at our district's meeting is because this process so far is not a public one, and therefore if you have any in CA, the agencies who would be relevant about this siting, we can issue our opinion to them that we have the authority and ability to hear this publicly with sufficient time to weigh in. So with that, I hope that was as clear as mud. I will turn it over to Todd and Jacob to discuss with us briefly why they're here.
Hi.
Oh, you just muted yourself, I think, by accident.
Tap to speak. Okay.
There you go.
Am I good now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. My name is Jacob Morris. I am the director of the Harlem Historical Society and also the New York City Freedom Trail Foundation. And Elizabeth Jennings Graham has been a location on the New York City Freedom Trail, which is primarily concentrated in downtown Manhattan, which before the Civil War was really like New York City's Harlem. I still think back to when the African burial ground was discovered or rediscovered in the early 1990s when they excavated the federal office building downtown. And people were so surprised that there was an extensive, let's call it major, Black presence in early New York City or New Amsterdam. In regards to She Built New York, the goals of She Built New York.
I have to go. I have to go. Sorry, I'll call you back.
What's the matter, Todd?
I'm back.
Oh, you're back? You okay?
Yeah.
Oh, you were talking. Oh, Jesus.
Hey, gentlemen, we just have a few minutes, so I'd love to get to the details.
Yeah, I apologize for that. So, the goals of She Built New York to like redress this imbalance in representation in monuments in New York City by the inclusion of women of color. Absolutely very worthy. And Elizabeth Jennings Graham, who was responsible for the lawsuit that led to the desegregation, the incident that led to the lawsuit, that led to the desegregation of streetcars and public transportation in New York City 100 years before Rosa Parks. is incredibly historically significant. And our city should be proud of this, and she should be honored. The question is, where should she be honored? And this has arisen not just with Elizabeth Jennings Graham, but with the other great women who were also preliminarily announced as finalists to be honored by the She Built New York initiative. Billie Holiday in Queens at Queensborough Hall, Maritza Lyons in Uptown Manhattan. And there's problems, not with who's getting honored, but where they're getting honored and how the decision was made. And also, you know, that the two women who made the decision, the two people who made the decision, the arbitrary and I would say less than thoughtful decision about where to site these monuments, that process was absolutely not transparent. And for example, your community board wasn't brought into the siting decision-making process in regards to Elizabeth Jennings Graham.
Mr. Morris, I just want to intervene briefly because there actually has been no decision formally made or announced. So as far as we are, you're correct that we certainly weren't consulted, and we're happy to weigh in on our, you know, any dissatisfaction with a process that wouldn't include transparency. Totally hear you. But this is not something that has been announced, nor are there current plans for it according to the city as of now. Just to put a fine point.
Can people see my screen, by the way?
Yes.
Yeah. Now
you see there's a location for the monument.
Yes, proposed.
Right.
It says proposed.
Well, no, this is a response to the FOIL that we did. These are actual plans.
Yeah, we had to find these because they wouldn't dispose them.
I'm
just
putting a fine point on it that
okay, understood. Yeah,
I want to share what you know, but there is no formal public knowledge that any decision has been made.
So, Mr. Smith, with you know, one thing we've been discovering throughout the city, unfortunately, with the percent for art process, and also is that they do a lot of things and only tell the community boards long after the fact. And it's really a problem with the public art programs, especially the Department of Cultural Affairs. And the fact that, you know, there was an announcement made 3 years ago, and we have a location that has never been provided to you that was declared 2 years ago. We have no real historical justification for it. To us says we can't be sure what that you're saying. They may tell you we have no plans, but we don't know. For all we know, they may have already selected an artist. This has happened many times before. Many people may know there was a pink Gumby. They call it the pink sunbather in Long Island City that was produced, and they did it without telling the community board. And they had to actually there was such an outrage in Long Island City that there was reform legislation passed against percent for art because they were consistently doing major art projects without disclosing people and selecting the artists without people even being aware. So I wouldn't be so sure. And the reason when we did this FOIL to find out that there was a specific location, as you can see here, already determined, says to us that they are quite far along. And the reason that they are not moving forward is because there are these political issues, because it's actually disrespectful to Black history. It really is. This is a very specific part of Black history that is embedded in Lower Manhattan in an array of Black organization. And this is a history that's been dispossessed. Blacks have been evicted from Lower Manhattan and all throughout the city. And they are putting it in a place that makes no sense to the experts on the subject, including Mr. Morris, but also all of the Black historians and experts that we've talked about. It's actually quite insulting that and that they can use this fact that it's not a formal proposal to then engineer something where they're going to just launch it. They're going to show up one day and say, as you guys well know, we welcome, hello guys, here's our plan for the Elizabeth Jennings Graham, and it's all going to be done.
Right.
And you're going to have nothing, and we're going to be shocked, and we're going to have to fight it in the press. So I'm sorry to go on, but it would be so much more positive.
This item, so I would like to shore up our position so that we can help you. Is that okay?
Exactly. So that's why we just want to let you know that this might happen in a disastrous way, and we want to give you the information now.
We appreciate it, and we do not disagree that any public art installation or siting should have a transparent process, and we also do not disagree that DCA can be a particularly difficult agency to deal with in this regard. We do have a lot of history with DOT public art program and other ones coming to us publicly well in advance and having a public conversation around these public art installations. My opinion, and I would love to hear from members of my committee as well if anyone disagrees, is that we would be very happy to put into writing communication with DCA and anybody else who's relevant within the city and our elected officials, stating that we insist on a transparent process for deciding of any public art in our district. And that's true in general, but we'd be happy to put a fine point on it for this particular issue as well, if that will help bring attention to it and support this initiative. I don't think we disagree with anything about this, but that's pretty much, I think, the way we could be most supportive, because we're certainly not going to take like a formal position, against something. I think we would just want to be on the record asking for transparency in a timely manner.
As an example of a way.
Todd. Thank you. So I want to say thank you. I really appreciate you saying what you just said. That would be wonderful if your committee and the board called for more transparency. The fact of the matter is as you know, Jimmy Van Bramer is the chair of the Cultural Affairs Committee in City Council. He's term limited, and we've had extensive interactions with the committee and with his director of legislative affairs. And I had a conversation with his director of legislative affairs just a couple days ago, and I said, what the legislation calls for is great, but there's no compliance mechanism built into the legislation in regards to transparency of process. If you go back, Todd, if you can go back to.
We just have 1 or 2 more minutes and we've got to convene our joint session. So we'd love to hear any further.
I'll wrap this up real quick. I just would like you guys to take specific note of 2 items on the PowerPoint. One, the picture of Rosa Parks in Montgomery, Alabama. I would like the members of the committee to note that they cited Rosa Parks approximately 30 feet from where she got on the bus, that she had that very negative interaction with that bus driver. So, in other words, the citing decision was sensitive to the history of the moment that led to so much in civil rights history in this century. The same thing happened in New York City. And so we feel that Elizabeth Jennings Graham, her location should be where she got either on the streetcar or thrown off the streetcar. That led to the lawsuit that led to the desegregation 100 years before Rosa Parks. This is so monumental to be lauded and appreciated for a major contribution for New York City. Now, let me go to the.
No, I'm sorry.
Donovan,
We have to move to our joint meeting. Our joint meeting is convening at 6:45. I would like to hear from members of the committee, though, if anyone has any.
let me just say this about Donovan Richards. Donovan Richards explicitly came out very recently, and he said, and he wrote a letter, and there's the letter in our PowerPoint, which you can, of course, share with the members of the committee and the board.
We will.
He says that the Billie Holiday location that they picked, which was at Queensborough Hall, is inappropriate, and that Billie Holiday and a statue to her, as well as her superlative sisters, Ella Fitzgerald and Lena Horne, belong in Addersley Park, where they lived, where they contributed so much to entertainment and jazz history.
Yeah, and I'll end it too.
So that's a major precedent. And I just want to convey my appreciation to you for exactly what you said in regards to that. If this board would do a preliminary resolution regarding transparency and its importance, we will be so appreciative.
However, I've got to ask you guys to stop your presentation so that
I'll just say one sentence, just for
members of my committee.
I just wanted to add, Mr. Schmidt, I'll just add, I also thank you guys for listening to us and hearing this. I know the city hasn't wanted to talk about this for 3 years, but yes, the Donovan Richards showed that if you take an affirmative gesture to fight for proper representation of Black history before this goes along, you can make a change that everybody in the whole city and all the people who care about these things will appreciate. And I think your community board can do the same thing that Donovan Richards has done here. Thank you.
I'd love to hear from any members of my committee who have any clarification questions or comments, or if anyone disagrees with my proposal that we put this into writing for the DCA, which I think has a different acronym now, but you all know what I mean. Todd.
Okay, so I think if we're going to do this, the sooner the better. We know the way things work in this city. The site and placement of monuments and everything else often takes a backseat to all sorts of other considerations. So let's do it, and let's do it quickly. And they're absolutely right. It makes no sense to put a monument of this type wherever. It should be cited if we're thinking about the public interest and educating our broader public in a way that'll emphasize the importance of the monument.
Great, thank you, Todd. Thank you for the input. Yes, Samir, go ahead.
Just to clarify, what you're proposing is not to have a resolution about the specific siting, right? It's about, the resolution would be about the public process and the transparency. Is that correct?
Yes, we're not going to pass a resolution per se on this topic. We're going to put this into writing that we can send out much sooner, based on community board precedent and our public record to DCA and anybody else who's relevant, to state that, to state that the proposed siting is something that has never come before us, that we have not had an opportunity to weigh in procedurally in any manner on this topic, and that we insist on there being a public process and transparency for the siting of this monument.
Perfect, thank you.
Let's see. Yes, John.
Yes, I first of all, I hope.
John, you just went silent.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. No, I'll just be quick. I agree with what my colleague said. But in the resolution, in addition to talking about transparency, I do feel it's important to say that the process should take into account and be respectful of the history, in terms of where it should be placed. I think that is important. If you look at the precedents of, if you look at the Rosa Parks one, and there are other ones I could cite to you. So if you could just, in addition to transparency and process, talk about the process being respectful of the history.
Yes, I believe that's in the spirit of what we're discussing and appropriate. Thanks, John.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Todd, your hand is up, but I think that you're done. If you're not, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm done. Turn me off.
Anyone else? And I'd love to see if there are any hands, members of the public who have anything they'd like to say on this topic. If so, please raise your hand. Yes, Charles, you can unmute yourself and speak.
Yes, transparency is always important, and I do hope that the African American community themselves can also weigh in on where monuments or statues to Black history should be placed in our wonderful city, and hopefully they'll also have a major input in these decisions too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. And yes, Catherine Ellington, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. I just wanted to say how pleased I am to hear the call for transparency. I thought this was a done deal already, and it doesn't seem like it is. So, you know, anything you can do with transparency, and to, in particular, make sure that it's historically appropriate. It is historically appropriate that a lot of these monuments should be downtown. There are a number of African Americans of great prestige who held businesses and conduct abolitionist work downtown, and so this part of history is important to Manhattan, and it's an important part of understanding racial tension, racial healing. So I just wanted to say, if there's anything I can do to help, let me know.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the comment. Any other raised hands from members of the public? And any further comments or concerns from members of the committee? I am going to assume we are unanimous on this position. Since this is not a formal resolution, but written communication, we are not going to take a vote on this, but I believe that we can vote by acclamation. If everyone will just say aye and raise your hand, that would be great. And if anyone disagrees, speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, great. I think those raised hands are in support. Thank you, everyone. Gentlemen, thank you for your time and your consideration to this important topic. And we'll be in touch from the board office with next steps.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, everyone. All right, that wraps up the agenda for the Parks and Public Spaces Committee. So we're doing a little dance here where I'm adjourning this committee meeting. And now I'm calling into session the joint meeting for Parks and Public Spaces and Landmarks.